Um, you know, Russia didn't go to war against Ukraine. Ukraine went to war against Russia. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand the reality. Ukraine has always been a tool of the United States, of NATO, of Europe to undermine Russia. This was something that the United States itself acknowledged in 2008 when Ambassador William Burns, who was then the U.S. ambassador to Russia, wrote a memorandum saying "Niet means niet." A red line is Ukraine. Yeah. You know, NATO and the United States lied to Russia about the expansion of NATO. Have you forgotten this? Have you forgotten the lies told to Russia? No, those lies were real. NATO in 2008 were threatening to expand to Georgia and Russia. And Russia said, "Niet, we're not letting you this close to our borders. We're not letting you, an organization that exists solely to use Russia as a foil to increase your militarism, this close to our borders, especially in Ukraine, where if you do this, you threaten our strategic existence." And so the West promoted this war. The West, it's the United States that undermined Ukrainian, what passed for democracy by promoting the Maidan coup and then empowering Ukrainian nationalists. You deny that Azov is a nationalist formation that aspires to the ideology of Stepan Bandera, which is directly linked to Adolf Hitler and the ideology of Nazi Germany. It wasn't Russia that went after the Ukrainian people. It was the Ukrainians that went after the Russian people. It was Ukrainians that outlawed the Russian language, the Ukrainians that outlawed the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainians that called the Russians Moskul, treated them as animals. And so when Russia stands up and says, "We will defend the Russian people," and they warned everybody, "Don't do this or we will respond." It's not as though Russia woke up one day and said, "The heck with international law." Russia actually adhered to Russian international law. What do you think the Minsk Accords were? Yes. They were an agreement to bring about an end to the tensions, the fighting in Ukraine that didn't seek any territorial advantage for Russia. The Minsk Accords made no effort whatsoever to turn territory over to Russia. But it was the French, the Germans, and the Ukrainians who said that we will use the Minsk Accords as a facade, a lie, to build up a Ukrainian army so that it can defeat the Russians. So, no, yes, Russia today has taken 4 territories: Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. But they didn't aspire to do that. They did it only when it became clear that the West was going to use Ukraine as a proxy in a conflict of existential nature to Russia. The goals of the West in the Ukrainian conflict is the strategic defeat of Russia. Have we forgotten this? Yes. Strategic defeat means the economic collapse, the political collapse, the social collapse. It means the end of Putin and the end of Russia. So, no, I'm not going to allow Russia to be thrown into the same category as the United States. Russia has, after all, been adhering to international law and respecting international law a lot more than the United States has. And China and Taiwan, gosh, I don't know. I only have to look at American policy that says it's a one China policy, which means we recognize that Taiwan is part of China. Yes. And yet now we're trying to draw Taiwan away from China. The problem isn't China. The problem is the United States. And there's always been the United States. So, no, it's not that the world has lost respect for international law. The United States has never respected international law. And you say, what's the future like? I think Russia and China have sort of shaped that. They, if you remember, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met in Beijing on January 4th, 2022, where they issued a 5,000-word joint statement that basically said we are in opposition to the rules-based international order. That is the title given to America's hegemonic control of the world. And we're going to replace it, and this is the important part, with a law-based international order. A law-based international order. That means that Russia and China recognize there needs to be a fabric of international law laid over the global community so that we know what the rules are. And the rules aren't dictated by one power, but the rules are accepted by all powers as law. So I do think that going forward in the world, you will see Russia, China, BRICS, speak about the necessity of international law, and it will further isolate the United States, which behaves as a spoiled child. above the law. No law applies to us except our law. It's inconsistent with the values that America embraces domestically. We're supposed to be a nation of laws, governed by the rule of law, defined by the Constitution of the United States. Through that Constitution, we entered into an international community known as the United Nations, and we signed a charter to the United Nations, which constitutes international law. And under the Constitution of the United States, when we enter a charter such as this, that law becomes the law of the land here. But we violate international law on a daily basis. The problem isn't the rest of the world. The problem is the United States.
Yes, but at this moment, United States still is the main power in the world, right? So, when we talk about BRICS, BRICS, they are countries together against dollar. The main goal is this one, main message box, right? Yeah, there are much more agreements what they made with each other, and this is the new technology of international business, of course. But the first impulse why they do unite, it's against dollar. But also we heard from President Trump that he's going to be against all members or all collaboration with BRICS, with tariffs, etc., and use everything for mighty dollar. And you heard this also a lot of times. Is it possible that BRICS countries that do have these instruments to stop this domination dollar, US dollar? Or it's just like something they put on the table for trading? Because if Russia and the United States will agree on something, they can work together against the other civilized countries. I mean, Middle East or Brazil or something.
Well, I'll use the words of Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's not that Russia and BRICS are against the dollar.
Yeah.
It's that the United States won't let Russia and BRICS use the dollar. You see, how can you blame Russia if we say you can't use the dollar? We're denying you the dollar. We're denying you the benefits of the dollar.
Yes.
What do they want Russia to do? Roll over and play dead? No, Russia then says we will find ways to trade without the dollar. And when other nations recognize that the United States is using dollar dominance to dominate them, to impose their will on them, other nations also say it's imperative that we find alternatives to the dollar. But it's not that the impetus came from these nations trying to isolate the United States. The impetus came from the United States trying to isolate these nations. And we are early enough in the process where there is no viable alternative to the dollar as of yet. BRICS does not have the ability to generate a BRICS currency or to create a basket of currencies that trade as efficiently as the dollar. What Trump is realizing right now is that the best way to save the dollar is to keep the dollar in play. And that's why he's looking to have better economic relations with Russia. Because if you do that and Russia has access to the dollar again, then that takes the impetus away from Russia and the BRICS nations going. The primary purpose of BRICS is not de-dollarization. That's not even an official function of BRICS. BRICS would prefer not to de-dollarize. BRICS would prefer to use the dollar because it is the global currency right now, and there's nothing that can replace it. But if the United States won't allow people to use the dollar, then they have to find alternatives. But I don't think this is a negotiating ploy on the part of BRICS. I think it's a reality. It's real politic. And if the United States recognizes the downside of denying people access to the dollar, then maybe they'll change their policies, which I think is the direction they're going with Russia.
Yeah. Now, from this global, as a Georgian, I want to see this picture, how bad it's for us or how good it's. Like, for these years, when I said that we knew that in America there is a justice and a fair play, etc., I said this because I have reason. Like, we had this message from all politics, like opposition, position, for everyone. We could not realize what is real, like before internet and social media, etc. But now we know, like, we have been instruments against. But now, in this moment, we don't know. Is there more interest about this region? Is America is going to go from our region, or is going to fight against Russia here, like same as in Ukraine? Like, could we wait for war or not? We don't know about this policy. What now is Trump given on the table? So what we can wait in Georgia? Is going to be something happen here or not?
I mean, this is a complicated question,
Yeah.
and it's one that's very personal for me. As you may or may not be aware of, my wife is from Sukhumi,
Yes.
and she and her family were ethnically cleansed in 1993 during the Civil War, during the fighting in Abkhazia.
Yes.
And my wife and her relatives blame Russia. They say that Russia is to blame. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. It's their perception. The perception that Russia helped facilitate the war that cost Georgia, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia,
Yes.
and that Russia continued an aggressive stance against Georgia that led to the 2008 conflict. But I think people are starting to wake up to a different reality. That the reality of 1993 was that it was a very complicated situation, and that Russia was going through problems of its own. I remind people that within days of the fall of Sukhumi, Boris Yeltsin had tanks in the streets of Moscow firing on the Russian parliament, that there was a political civil war taking place in Moscow, which means that Georgia wasn't number one on Moscow's attention, and that what was happening in Georgia was probably more or less a reflection of the chaos that existed within Georgia, the conflict between Eduard Shevardnadze and Gamsar Kuria. And the Mechedrioni, nobody talks about them anymore, but they were a big factor in Georgian life, a lawlessness that existed that led to a sort of brutal nationalism that did not lend itself well to making amends with the Abkhazian or the South Ossetians. And so I think we need to be careful about talking about, misrepresenting history. What I would say is this: Georgia has a long history with Russia. You know Russia.
Of course.
And the fact that many Georgians live in Russia, thrive in Russia, and the fact that many Russians enjoy visiting Georgia means that there is a foundation of good relations between the two. It's a natural relationship.
Yes.
The United States and Georgia do not have a natural relationship. In fact, the United States only became interested in Georgia when it appeared that Georgia could be used as a tool against Russia.
Yes.
And that is all Georgia has ever been. I don't mean to be harsh. I don't mean to be, sounding cruel.
It's okay.
But
It's okay. Like,
Georgia
we need it. We need this, so it's okay. You can be.
Yeah, Georgia has never been anything other than a tool for America. And think about it, a tool. If you and I are in the construction business and you're my partner, you're a human being. We're a partner. We share things. If I view you as a partner, I treat you differently.
Yes.
But if all you become is a hammer in my toolbox, that means I will hit this hammer as hard as I can until it breaks, and then I will throw it away and find another hammer. I don't really care about you. I'm not going to care for you. I'm not going to treat you like a human. Georgia has been a tool of America.
Yes.
We now know that America, the United States, talked Saakashvili into engaging in a military conflict in Ossetia in 2008.
Yes.
That Saakashvili received instructions from the United States to attack. How do Georgians feel about sending Georgian men off to Iraq and dying in Iraq? How do they feel about sending men off to Afghanistan and dying in Afghanistan? These aren't Georgian wars. You went there because you're a tool of the United States, because you wanted to be seen as being an ally of the United States, but you've never been an ally. Had you been an ally, there would have been American airplanes over Tbilisi in 2008 stopping the Russians from bombing you. But there were no American airplanes. Nothing.
Like the pro-American politics use this legend that for real they aware some American planes and also American ships in the Black Sea to help us. Then Russia stopped. They use this information line that United States were ready to help Georgia when 2008. Russians were close to Tbilisi. Of course, it's really.
It sounds like me getting in a bar fight.
Yeah.
It sounds like me getting in a bar fight and getting beat up by a gang of people, only to find out that my friend was in the bar and they stopped beating me up because my friend was watching the fight. That's no, I still got beat up, and Georgia got beat up, and Georgia paid a heavy price. My point is this: the United States has a policy of using the Southern Caucasus region as a region of turmoil to weaponize the Southern Caucasus into creating instability in Russia.
Yes.
What does this mean? It means we're not interested in you as a nation that is seeking to grow economically, to flourish socially. We're looking to create chaos and anarchy and violence using you as the tool. What does it mean to open up a second front against Russia?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Georgia, you've done this before. You know the Russians will destroy you. You know you have no chance. It doesn't mean you're not brave. You're just not strong enough. You're not big enough. And America won't come to your assistance. We were trying to get you into a fight solely to divert Russian resources away from Ukraine, and then we would sacrifice you. This is the fact. You were always a sacrificial pawn to the United States of America, always a sacrificial pawn.
Yes.
And so when we look at the situation today, what direction should Georgia go? I think the past is your guide. Do you want to continue to be deceived by the United States into believing that we are truly your friend when all you've ever been is a tool that we use and discard? Or do you want to make good with your old friend, Russia, who's always been there for you? Maybe not the perfect friend. Friendships are tough when you got the bigger friend and the littler friend. Sometimes the relationship is uneven. But at the end of the day, Russia is your friend. Russia is next to you. Your prosperity is Russia's prosperity. And that's why I'm sort of stunned that Georgia continues to buy into the fiction of EU membership. You will never be a member of EU. They will never accept you. When BRICS membership is
like a main reason why it's not possible to Georgia to join EU, if you can explain for audience, because this is the most painful for most people to hear in Georgia, because like they grew up waiting for the day when they join in the EU, because 26 years before our president, second president, Shevardnadze, said that I'm gonna be still alive when we join European Union. Like, he's dead now, but I remember I was like 6 years old when I heard the first time about European Union. Like all my life, I heard from politics that our goal is to join this union. But I see the reasons. But when someone from foreign countries, mostly from America, says this, it's more believable for our audience. If you can say main reasons why can't we join European Union?
The first is you don't qualify. Your economy isn't what's necessary to become part of the European Union. Second of all, the practical reasons. What is your common border with Europe? What common border do you have? The Black Sea, and that can be interdicted by Russia, by Turkey at any time. And the third thing is, with all due respect to Georgians, and remember, I'm married to one, Europe doesn't view you as Europe. You're not European. You are a tool. They've offered you the promise of European membership to get you to sacrifice yourself on the altar of American imperial power. That's it. You were never meant to be a member of the European Union. It's an artificiality. At best, Georgia is a Eurasian country, but the notion that you're part of Europe, you've never been part of Europe. Your history is not of Europe. You're of Russia, of Asia, of Anatolia, of Persia. That's your history. Why suddenly do you wake up and say, no, we are European? It's an artificial way of thinking that's been injected into you, promoted to you. It's a false hope, a false promise. And it's solely designed to get you to do what we want you to do. Then we will sacrifice you and we will walk away from you. The Georgian people have to understand you have been betrayed by the West. Don't believe the words of the politicians that come in from the West and speak about this, about European Union. You are one of us. Georgia is Europe. They said the same thing about Ukraine. And look at Ukraine today. That's the future of Georgia. Death, destruction, the termination of the nation state of Georgia. The Georgia Dream Party deserves a tremendous amount of credit for navigating Georgia out of this troubled waters. Your economy is much better than the economy of Europe because you've avoided sanctioning Russia, because you've avoided going down the path of a war economy. And democratically, you're stronger than almost all European nations. Look at France. They've imprisoned Marine Le Pen. Look at Romania. They've imprisoned Georgescu. Look at Europe. Alternative for Deutschland, shut down at the polls. Here you had Georgia Dream get targeted by the United States, targeted by European Union, and they survived. They succeeded.
I am glad that you touched this topic, because about democracy, like as I said in the beginning of our live stream, I represent political movement, political party, Georgian Conservatives for Georgia. But 2 years ago, we were a conservative movement, which was just deleted from system, like government just banned us. We could not go to the elections. We had to join other party. And now we try to make new political party, this Conservatives for Georgia, but also because of some kind of made up reasons, they banned also our party again. So 3 times we have been banned. Like we don't have a right to have our party, political party, I mean. This is also like the democracies, maybe they built some kind of democracy, but now they want to go about this conservative ideology, that they are pragmatics and conservatives. And that's why they don't need the opponents in it, because the Saakashvili political party is liberal, and every opposition party are pro-Europeans, but are not pro-Europeans. So now, like maybe they are using it for some kind of bigger good, but now what J.D. Vance also said to Europeans, they are fighting against free speech and against democracy, using this bureaucratic tools. It has been used against us too. So maybe it could be one of the reasons why Georgian Dream can't find some certain points of touch with the Trump administration. Like they said they're gonna have good relations, but we don't see it. Like we see the opposite at this moment. Why Georgian Dream can't find good relations with Trump? Is this one of the reasons? Because they fight also non-fairly as Europeans?
First of all, I'm not going to defend any suppression of democracy. I'm in favor of democracy, and I'm in favor of people being allowed to express their political opinions, even if they disagree from me.
Yes.
I can't speak to why Georgia Dream does what it does because I don't know. I'm not part of Georgia Dream. I don't sit in on their meetings. I know nothing. What I would say is this, though, as an outside observer, the United States and Europe led by the United States, has spent the better part of a decade or more trying to steal democracy from Georgia. If you dissected the USAID budget and saw how it was used in Georgia, they start by empowering what they call the diversity of the nation. Now, this means that they will empower elements of society that I think traditional Georgian culture would not embrace: homosexuality, transgenderism, alternative lifestyles. They empower them in the name of diversity. And then what they do is once they empower them, they politicize them. They bring them together into political movements.
Yes.
And then the next thing they do with their money is they create mechanisms to counter what they call disinformation. But what that is to counter any criticism of the new diversified parties, to silence the opposition. And then they move forward to politicize this, to weaponize this so that they can win the election and push out the conservatives. And this was real. This was happening. And they almost succeeded. So now if you're Georgia Dream, you just dodged this bullet. Again, I take a look at what Georgia Dream did between the initial when they initially put forward the so-called foreign agent legislation that they had to withdraw.
Yeah.
And then they subsequently put it forward again. And this time they were able to move it through without any real opposition because they had learned, they had understood, they were prepared for everything that could have possibly happened, and they succeeded. But I would believe the Georgia Dream at this point in time doesn't feel secure enough to allow opposition, especially an opposition that's on their side, an opposition that could take votes away from them, weaken their, I don't think they're secure enough. I think they still need to move forward and solidify their hold on, the conservative hold on power in Georgia before they, as a person who believes in democracy, I'm not supporting this. I'm just trying to explain why this might be the case. In the United States, you have Trump engaging with Russia directly.
Yes.
But I don't believe Donald Trump understands the dynamic of Georgia. I don't think he's been briefed on the dynamic of Georgia. And so I think he still believes that Georgia, is a friend and ally of the United States, that Georgia is ready to do the bidding of the United States. I don't think he understands this new dynamic that has happened with Georgia Dream. Not that you're our enemy, but that you are no longer going to be used as a tool.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that he has put enough time and effort into this problem. I don't think he has addressed the issue of the Southern Caucasus at all. Take a look at what's happening with Armenia. And Armenia suddenly, veering back into the Russian camp because of what the Armenian president says, a new geopolitical reality.
Yeah.
I don't think Trump is briefed on the new geopolitical reality. And until he is, I think that U.S.-Georgian relations are going to be very much in a flux. And then the question is, therefore, what does Georgia do? Do you tread water waiting? Because what's the best thing that can happen if Donald Trump, decides to have good relations with Georgia? He will place demands on you.
Yes.
He will demand that you become an outpost of American power, that you become a tool of American power projection. And that will never end well with Georgia. You're too far away from America. You're too small. And we don't lose anything by losing you.
Yes.
Russia has an absolute interest in the stability of Georgia, an absolute interest in the prosperity of Georgia. Again, I can't tell Georgia what to do. I want Georgia and America to be friends. I have a selfish reason, because I have a Georgian wife and we want to visit Georgia and we want to arrive in Georgia as friends. We don't want the Georgians to look at me or my wife or other Americans as the enemy. We're not your enemy. But what we also aren't are allies willing to die for you.
Yes.
We're not going to die for you. We're not going to sacrifice our existential survival on your behalf. And there's nothing Georgia can do to elevate yourself to that status. I think we should look at being friends. I like being friends. I think we should look at having good relations. We can have good trade. It needs to realize that geopolitically, its future is with Russia, not the United States. And the sooner the Trump administration understands this reality, the sooner it will adapt to this reality. And this isn't a bad thing for Georgia, because if the United States and Russia have good relations, Kirill Dmitriev, the head of the Foreign Investment Development, just came to the United States, where he had a series of meetings, high-level meetings, that focused on the business aspect of this. Could you imagine if Georgia became sort of the banking sector for international investment into southern Russia? To say we are the banking hub, we're the Dubai of the Caucasus, bank, invest. Georgia would thrive, businesses would thrive, Georgian-Russian relations would be close. I'm not saying that that's the solution. I'm saying that is realistic under a Trump attitude towards Russia. It would never be realistic under a Biden attitude. But if the United States and Russia can repair their relations, then the it's an open book on what can happen for Georgia, good things. But it requires Georgia to renew diplomatic relations with Russia, and to develop a positive attitude towards Russia. I understand right now in Georgia, there's a lot of negative attitude towards Russia. Hell, I'd be negative too. They bombed Gori, they bombed Tbilisi. There's issues there. Abkhazia still is not part of Georgia. Ossetia is not part of Georgia. But, and I can't speak for the Georgian Dream government, but I believe that there's discussions taking place about the future of both of these territories. And Russia might be more inclined to take a positive stance towards the Georgian point of view if they believe that there would be something beneficial from it, meaning that if we repair our relations with Georgia, then we're looking forward to good relations going forward, not having Georgia divorce and once again pivot to the West.
About this negotiations about Russia and the United States, President Trump said that before elections, he said he needs 24 hours. Of course, we all knew that it was commercial, but now it is happening. That they are negotiating, right?
Yep.
What do you think? I know at the end of negotiations, the both sides will start talking about how good they were, how good job they did, and how they won in these negotiations. But what for real is gonna happen? What's gonna take Russia? Because only the territory is what he's holding right now, or something more, and how Ukraine gonna end? Because I don't know. I know that Americans gonna take something, Russians gonna take something, but what about this Ukraine, and what about the European Union? Because it is happening in the center of Europe. It's not the joke. When a war ends, it's gonna have this impact on all this continent. So how this negotiation is gonna end, and how long it's gonna be? What do you think? Like 1 month, 2 months, or 1 year? How it looks like in dynamics of war?
I think it's important for Georgians and other Europeans and people around the world to understand that there are consequences to going to war.
Of course.
And I would say this to anybody in Georgia who believes that Georgia should have a more bellicose approach towards Russia.
Yes.
There are consequences to going to war, and there are consequences to losing a war.
Yeah.
Ukraine has lost this war. They're not going to win. There's no chance of them winning. NATO has lost this war. It has bankrupted itself militarily trying to assist the Ukrainians. The United States has lost this war. Russia has won this war. I need to say that one more time so people understand. Russia has won this war.
Yes.
And to the victors go the spoils. So this war will not end well for Ukraine. They should never have gotten involved in this war to begin with. Russia so far has not articulated a desire for territories beyond that which Russia deems to be constitutionally part of Russia. That is Crimea and the 4 territories of Novorossiya, which were annexed as a result of the referendum in September of 2022. That doesn't mean that if this war continues, the Russian stance won't change. But Russia has made clear that there will be demilitarization. And again, I want to remind the people that are losing grasp of reality. In 2014, 2015, the Ukrainian army was on the verge of being destroyed by the Russian separatists supported by the Russians in the Donetsk region. The reason for the Minsk Accords was for Russia to not kill these soldiers, let them go, and then enter into a negotiation to bring about peace. Starting in 2015, however, Ukraine entered into a relationship with NATO and the United States. And this was a military relationship where we would train and equip a new Georgian army capable of defeating the Russians. And we've done that from 2015 to 2022. The Russians have said that that army can't exist. Anything that was touched by NATO can't exist. Ukraine will never be a member of NATO, and they will not be allowed to have a NATO military. So the size of the Ukrainian military will be diminished. Today it numbers 800,000. The Russians have said it'll probably number 50,000.
Yes.
Well, that's what happens when you lose a war. And Ukraine has lost this war. And Russia won't yield on this. Russia isn't going to say we lost 150,000 of our own men just to give Ukraine a chance to do this all again down the road. Denazification. Again, this is something in the West people say, well, it's an exaggeration.
Yes.
But the Russians know the reality of Stepan Bandera and of Banderism. They've experienced it firsthand. And this isn't just the sins committed by the Banderists in World War II, the murder of tens of thousands of Jews, hundreds of thousands of Poles, Ukrainians, and Russians. This is the resistance that was backed by the CIA from 1945 to 1954 that killed nearly 50,000 Soviet security personnel and another 100,000, 200,000 civilians. The Banderists are evil in the minds of the Russians and in the minds of anybody who studies the odious ideology of Stepan Bandera. And yet it's alive and well and living in Ukraine today. This is an ideology that trains children from very little age to hate Russians, to view the Russians as less than human, to open the door for the abuses of the Russians. And the Russians are saying that this ideology has to go. And for the people who say, well, that's unreasonable, was it unreasonable for the victorious allies at the end of World War II to say that Hitler's Nazi ideology had to be eradicated? That wasn't unreasonable. And Bandera's ideology is just as odious. And Ukraine has lost this war. So the Russians insist on denazification. These are two harsh realities that are going to have to be meted out on terms acceptable to the Russians. The Ukrainians don't get a vote. The reality is Ukraine, as you know it today, will no longer exist. There won't be a government that has links to Zelensky and the political forces that created Zelensky. These political forces will be eliminated. A new government will be put in place, just like both the Soviet Union and the United States did in Germany after the end of World War II. We had military government that took over, and we facilitated a new government. We didn't tell the Nazis, well, come on in, Nazis, and just take off your swastikas and you get to govern still. No, denazification means just that. And the same thing with demilitarization. And the last thing are the territories. The Russia will get these territories. This is the reality. Ukraine will not be joining the European Union. Ukraine will probably, if it wants to have control over its economic future, will probably end up joining some sort of economic union with Russia, similar to what Belarus has done. That is the future of Ukraine. Ukraine will be oriented towards Moscow, not towards Brussels. And the reason why is that Ukraine was dumb enough to believe the promises of the West. And that's a hint to Georgia. Don't believe the promises of the West, because you will end up just like Ukraine or worse.
Now people are waking up in Georgia, so we really don't believe the West any word.
Good, don't. I would ask one exception.
Yeah.
Since I'm from the West, believe me when I say I want to be your friend.
Okay. Yes. That's why you are here with me.
I know how to eat kinkali. The right way.
Yeah. But there is one thing. Maybe Ukraine is gonna end like lost territories, denazification, demilitarization, and then it's gonna become something like a Belarus to Russia. But there is also one thing that Americans want some minerals for half trillion, I think. In this, it's a huge numbers. Okay, so what about this? Like, do Americans have the rights to take something from Ukraine right now, sacrifice it, or Russia is going to give them or not?
Well, let's start with the first question. Does America have the right? If your house burns down and you're out on the street in the gutter, freezing in the water, do I have the right to come to you and say, I will help you, but you have to give me this in exchange?
If I help, yes, maybe I have some.
So I put my hand out and I say, I have the right. If you grab my hand, you just gave me the right.
Yes.
Okay, so what Trump is doing, and I'm not saying that what he's doing is right. I don't like it. But what he's doing is he's saying, I'm putting my hand out to get, to help you, but it's on my terms. And if you accept my hand, then you gave me the right. It's not fair. It's not just, but it would be a right if Ukraine agrees to it. And I think one of the reasons why Ukraine is hesitating is because it's so fundamentally wrong what Trump is trying to do. He's literally trying to. What Trump is trying to do to Ukraine is what the West was doing to Russia in the 1990s,
Yes.
to destroy its ability to survive economically. Would Russia agree to this? I can't speak for the Russian government. I don't know. I mean, I would say that if Russia got denazification, demilitarization, recognition of territories, that there's a possibility it would negotiate a way, be willing to turn a blind eye to Trump doing this. Because here's the other thing. You have Europe screaming that they want to put peacekeeping forces in Ukraine.
Yes.
That will never happen. Russia will never allow that. But what Trump is saying is that having America dominate the Ukrainian minerals, that's in effect a peacekeeping force, even though it's not military. It's such a heavy American presence that it would deter any additional future Russian aggression. I think it's ridiculous to talk about future Russian aggression because Russia is going to control all of Ukraine politically, etc. I can't speak to the future. I think it's an ugly deal. I think it's a deal that violates all sensibilities. But given the fact that Ukraine put itself in this situation, and Russia, while they're not willing to bend the knee on any of their non-negotiables, if this was the only obstacle to peace, Russia may concede America's access to Ukrainian minerals as part of the price of peace. I don't know. I can't speak to it. I think it's a horrible deal. As much as I am upset with the Ukrainian government, I'm not upset with the Ukrainian people. I view them as victims. And I believe that the best path forward for the Ukrainians is for them to be able to rebuild their nation using the totality of the resources available to them. But if they cede these resources to the United States or others, then that denies them the ability to reach their potential. So it's a complicated situation. This is a lesson to be learned for the Georgians, that you lose control of your future if you start doing the bidding of others.
Yes.
Georgia Dream, and I know you're upset with Georgia Dream, and I understand why you're upset with Georgia Dream, and I support you for being upset with Georgia Dream. But we do have to acknowledge that Georgia Dream saved Georgia. That had Georgia Dream lost the election, had the European Union people come in, had they created a second front, had Georgia gotten involved in military operations against Russia, that Georgia would not exist today. You'd be gone. So it's a good thing that you have a problem with Georgia Dream, because it means that Georgia is alive, that Georgia is living. It's a bad problem for you, but it's a good problem for Georgia to have, because it's a Georgian problem, and Georgia's sorting out its own problem. As opposed to Georgia being like Ukraine, having outsiders divvying it up, taking the body apart for their own best interests. So I, again, encourage the Georgian people to look at Ukraine, look at the totality of the Ukrainian situation, and give a prayer to God that Georgia Dream won that election, because they saved Georgia from a fate worse than death.
About second front rhetorics and second front positions of the politics, maybe Georgian Dream made these decisions, but in the front line of political discussions, conservatives hold this position that we have to stay calm and not involved, and that's how Georgian Dream got support. Like we did there. It was like collaborating without collaborating. But I have one question. These peacekeeping forces, as you mentioned, I don't, as a military logic, I don't understand strategically why France or Great Britain or Italy or any big European country would send peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. Like it's one step forward to escalate the conflict with Russia or make problems with Russia, right? In the front, if you send your soldiers in Ukraine, of course, as a peacekeeper, so it doesn't matter. It's still a step forward to conflict, not to step back to conflict. Where is the logic, military logic or political logic to do this? So why Europeans want to do this? I mean, European politics. I know that people doesn't want it. European politics.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. So And when I talk too much, my throat gets a little sore. So I'll try and calm down my emotions. First of all, there's a political aspect to everything that's done. And the Europeans are trying to salvage the most they can out of a bad situation. And they believe that by putting a peacekeeping force on the ground, they are preserving Ukraine, what's left of Ukraine, politically. So that even though Zelensky may no longer be the president, the next generation of Ukrainian leaders come from the same power base that created Zelensky, that Ukraine will continue to be this entity that is totally reliant upon the West. And therefore, Ukraine continues to be a tool that can be used by the West against Russia. So they want to preserve as much of this tool as possible. And so they put that forward. It's also done in a way to pressure the United States, to get the United States to agree to peace terms that preserve Ukraine as it exists. Because realistically, it's just unrealistic. I mean, there's no way that these nations could muster sufficient forces, deploy them, and sustain them. It's an impossible dream. So they discuss it to create pressure on the United States, and it has worked to a certain extent because the United States is not yielding to Russia's demands. We are putting forward counter proposals that Russia's rejecting, but it's complicated this path towards peace. And then Europe also, there's an economic interest. Europe continues to view Ukraine as a source of raw materials, a source of agriculture, source of fertilizers, etc.
Workforce.
And they don't want to lose that as well. And then the other thing is, by bringing an end to the conflict, they can say they fought the Russians to a standstill. They can try and get some sort of victory out of this, which is important because Europe has put its political capital on defeating Russia. Remember, these are the same Europeans that said that it is their duty to humble Russia militarily on the battlefield, to humble Russia. How do you humble Russia? I mean, I want to remind people that and you know this as a Georgian, because you were part of the Soviet Union during the Second World War.
Yeah.
27 million people died. I mean, Russia's not going to roll over and play dead. I was in Russia for Victory Day 2 years ago, and I saw the emotion that the Russian people have towards what happened in World War II. I saw the emotion that's derived when Russia feels it's under attack from outsiders. You're not going to humble Russia. So it's sort of this false premise. And then the last thing is, I think Europe is starting to look reality in the face. They understand that if Russia wins in Ukraine on terms acceptable to Russia, that undermines their political viability. They sacrificed the future of their country in the name of sanctioning Russia. They sacrificed the future of their country in the name of strategically defeating Russia on the battlefield in Ukraine. They sacrificed everything to bring an end to Russia.
Yes.
And now Russia emerging victorious means that the people of Europe will start looking for somebody to hold accountable for what's happening. When the Germans wake up and realize that the good life they once had, which is probably gone forever, if not for many generations, is solely to blame, the people solely to blame are the politicians, then they will probably be voted out of office. The same thing in France, throughout Europe. And so these political and economic elites that have bought into this notion of confronting Russia through Ukraine can't admit defeat, can't allow the Russians to get the victory that they've earned on the battlefield, because that will translate into their political demise. And so what we're looking at here is an actual fight for political survival by the political and economic elite of Europe. That's it.
And I want also to discuss at the end, you also want to fight the cold, so I don't want to hold you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just apologize for coughing because I don't like the.
It's okay. We wish you good health.
Thanks.
It's interesting about this project in Russia. I know you are participating in it. It's a People's Club Unity. Maybe it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it all about? What is the goal of this forum? And what is the main topics you are talking about there?
Well, I was invited to become a member of this club. It's affiliated with the State Duma of Russia, so it has an official connection to the Russian government. And as you may or may not be aware of, my stance on bettering U.S.-Russian relations and trying to prevent a war between the United States and Russia made me the enemy of the Biden administration. They sent the FBI into my house. They've taken my passport and such. Now, the Trump administration has claimed that they have a different approach, but they haven't done anything practical yet to prove that. So I was hesitant because to become a member of this forum opens yourself up to be accused of being a tool of Russia. I'm nobody's tool. I'm my own tool. So I negotiated an observer status. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not a member. I'm an observer. If relations between the United States and Russia improves, I'll be glad to become a member because it's an important organization. It's an organization that discusses geopolitical issues, economic issues, issues of importance to Russia from the framework of trying to create peaceful outcomes, to avoid conflict, to have better relations. And this is always a good thing. I'm somebody who believes that having old men yak around the table is so much better than having young men go bang, bang, bang on the battlefield. That the more old people like myself can sit there and talk through problems, maybe come up with some solutions so that the young men get to stay at home with their wives and raise families as opposed to being taken to the battlefield and killing other young men. This is a good thing. And so I was invited to participate in the inaugural meeting as an observer, and they gave me the honor of speaking. And I spoke to U.S.-Russian relations. I spoke to the importance of improving U.S.-Russian relations, but I also spoke to the mechanisms of this. For instance, governments can only do so much, and this is an important message to the Georgian people as well, I believe, if you'll allow me the narcissism of believing that my opinion counts for much. But governments can open the door, but the people have to close the deal. Governments can say, we want to be friends, but the people have to become friends. The government can't make you my friend. Let's say Georgia and America are at loggerheads, and that the Georgian people don't trust the American people and we don't trust the Georgian people. But now your government talks to my government and they say, we would like to have good relations. And they meet together, they shake hands, they sign a document, and they open the door. But until I go through that door and come to you and put my hand out and you shake it and we sit down, then we talk. We sit down and talk and we say, what's your life like? What's my life like? What's important to you? What's important to me? Did you ever watch this movie? Yeah, I saw that movie. You ever read this book? Yeah, I read this book. Do you like hiking? I like hiking. You play football? I play football. And then you realize we have so much in common that we're human beings, fellow human beings, and we may speak different languages, have different religions, have different cultural values, but at the end of the day, we're humans, and humans want the same thing: peace. We want to live in peace, but we have to do the work. And so, what I was saying to the National Unity Club is that is Russia ready to be the friends of the American people?
Yes.
Russia has no reason to be friends with America. We betrayed them. We've been seeking their destruction. We've been lying to them. We've been cheating. We've been doing horrible things. We being the government. And the American people have been imprisoned intellectually by Russophobia, where we've accepted at face value all these negative things about Russia. Okay, that's the past. I'm not saying we should forget the past. We should never forget the past. But if we want to move forward, Are we going to be held prisoner by that past?
Yes.
If our governments are able to open the door, is Russia ready when the American people step through the door? What happens when the first Americans come to Russia? Not government people, but American citizens, and say, okay, we're here. We'd like to explore and see if we can become friends. Are the Russians going to treat them like, lepers, or are the Russians going to receive them?
I don't know their culture. They're gonna receive more than buy.
One would hope so, but there has to be a plan for this. There has to be the Russian society has to prepare for this moment. Just like I would say to Georgia, you need to prepare for the moment when Americans arrive in Georgia that we're not your saviors,
Yeah, of course.
that you don't view us as your saviors. When Americans arrive in Georgia, you view us as friends, not as saviors. One thing is, if you view us as saviors, you're putting yourself down. You're saying you need to be saved. If you view us as friends, you're rising yourself up. You're saying, we are Georgian. We don't need your help, but we'd love your friendship. But, we're not going to put conditions on this, because that's not friendship. If I came to you and said, look, I'd like to be friends with you, but, you've got to do things for me. Well, that's not friendship. That means that you're my servant, that I'm directing you. That's not friendship. Now, if you and I are friends and you see that I need help and you can't say, hey, Scott, I understand you're, you bought some land and you're trying to farm it and you have trouble. I got a tractor. Can I bring my tractor over and help you farm it? Well, that's friendship. As long as there's no strings, because you say, I'm going to bring my tractor and do it, but now you have to do something for me. Friendship means that we help each other because we want to help each other, because we're friends. Are the Georgian people ready to receive Americans as friends, not as saviors? That's an important question, because we're not going to save you. If you think we're going to save you, that relationship will only lead to your downfall. But if you want to be friends with us, that can lead to great things, wonderful things, because it's friendship. The European Union are not your friends. They're not your friends. They sought to destroy your country by getting you involved in a war with Russia. What friend does that? What friend tells a nation the size of Georgia to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of its young men? And that's what Europe was asking you to do. To sacrifice your economic stability, your economic well-being, to sacrifice your territory, to sacrifice your blood. How many Europeans truly know about Kakheti, Mingrelia? How many have gotten the soul of Georgia? I'm married to a Georgian. And I still haven't gotten into the soul of Georgia. I'm trying to, but it requires an effort. But in order to do it, you have to respect the Georgians. You have to go there and respect them. You have to say, I'm here to learn. Teach me about you. Let's do this as equals. But if we come in and say, we're the European Union, we are so much better than you. You have to come to us. You have to forget your past. You are now European. That's the biggest insult in the world, I would imagine, to a Georgian. To say that Georgia is Europe. No, Georgia is Georgia. That's a pretty darn good thing to be. I like it. I have a lot of respect for Georgians. I want to be friends with Georgia. I'm not here to save you. That's your job. Save yourselves. I'm here to be your friend and help you if you need help, but not to save you and dictate and use you as a tool only to discard you when you're no longer useful. So there, I've said it.
About friendship and the end of our stream, I want to say that if you ever plan to come to Georgia, we have contacts in Telegram to each other. So I want to invite you in Kakheti, my house, with your family, and show you what is Georgia all about. Thank you very much, Scott.
My wife's father is from Kakheti.
Oh, it's perfect.
He is from there, and so we have family there. So it would be an honor and a privilege to meet with you, see your home, see your country through your eyes. It would be a privilege, and so I hope we can make that happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.